And a lot of factors come into play. And a lot of it has to do with the work of the committees of cognizance. For instance, the Judiciary Committee. Our deadlines are so close together that the Policy Committee hasn't necessarily finished its work in sufficient time for the Appropriations Committee to fully reflect what the Policy Committee is thinking. So there are times in implementers over the past, in that process, where in terms of putting the meat on the bones, we've put language in an implementer which puts the framework around the target that the Appropriations Committee put for dollars. So there have been negotiations in the past, and I guess one could argue either way just how far implementers should go, and rather than standalone bills. But I will say that for many years we've done the implementation process in special session, where the committees of cognizance, the policy committees, aren't activated. So there have been times where, by necessity, sometimes policy issues have had to go into implementation. So I truly understand Representative Cafero's point, but there has been some flexibility over the years, depending on the circumstances.
You mentioned the magic word, special session.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed. As I said earlier, the goal is for us to complete business by June 8th. But I also will say that the budget process for government is not a stagnant process. It is a very dynamic process. And a lot can happen, particularly as Representative Cafero said, around the issue of the union concessions. So right now, everybody's just holding their breath, waiting to see what the ultimate outcome will be.
Well, I'm so glad we have someone as experienced as you are in there managing the project. Susan Keane, thank you so much for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Diane.
Good talking to you again. Another issue that came up and first surfaced really during last year's ill-fated run for Attorney General by then Secretary of the State Susan Bysiewicz were the qualifications needed to hold that office. The state Supreme Court determined that she did not meet those standards, and so the legislature has taken that up. Here's a portion of the recent debate in the House.
This bill comes before us, and it is a change to the statute that was originally passed in 1897 that deals with the qualifications for those individuals who seek the office of Attorney General. The language of the original statute, Mr. Speaker, required that anyone who seeks to run for Attorney General would be admitted to the bar of this state, and also for a continuous period of at least 10 years immediately prior to taking office. It also required that attorney have at least 10 years active practice at the bar of this state. And what this bill does is it takes out that last provision requiring that the 10 years, requiring that the practice be at the bar of the state.
I would submit to you that it is a great mistake to now decide that a lawyer on paper is good enough to be the chief attorney, the chief civil advocate.
The Supreme Court, I think, overshot the mark in the Bysiewicz case and ended up with an opinion that I think surprised an awful lot of people and left us all scratching our heads as to exactly how do you apply this to the next case, the next contest for Attorney General. But I think that what we are doing here, what we are prepared to do here tonight, really does also go too far in the opposite direction and misses the mark. And that there is no crying need for us to pass this bill today or even this year.
Make such a drastic change in our laws of 100 years that we have done the right thing, have the right person there as Attorney General. I find that very difficult, Mr. Speaker. And I want to know if a lot of thought was gone into the process, was put into the process about the hands-on experience that is needed for somebody who's going to lead the state on a day-to-day problems that are going to arise.
What we're dealing with here is who's eligible to serve in the office, but it also comes down to who can run for the office. And one of the objectives of the Connecticut Bar Association, and I do think that this was a meritorious objective is that they envision a situation based upon the decision of the Supreme Court. They envision situations where we're going to have litigation potentially every 4 years when one of the major parties nominates a candidate for this office.
And that bill would change the qualifications for serving as as Attorney General. It did pass the House by 91 to 51, not yet been taken up in the Senate. Joining us now is the new Attorney General of Connecticut, George Jepsen, taking over from a man who really dominated the Capitol landscape for many years, the now U.S. Senator Dick Blumenthal. Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Jepsen, thanks for being with us this morning.
And great to be here.
I can't bring myself to call you General. Is that okay?
I always tell people to call me George. It is funny that the salutation that's normally done is General, but and in other states around the country, it's very commonly used. But I'm always taken aback by it. So
somehow, unless you're in uniform, I just have trouble saying
George.
General. Well, George, that's good. Let me just ask you a general question, since we haven't really had a chance to have a nice long talk since you took over. How do you step into that office after Dick Blumenthal was there so long and really make it your own? And how would you say now, after several months, that the culture, the dynamics, and the goals have really changed under your leadership?
Well, I went into the state Senate taking Dick Blumenthal's seat in the state Senate.
So you're sort of used to it?
I'm used to it, and it doesn't faze me. Dick's a longtime personal friend. I was actually a law student intern of his when he was U.S. Attorney long time ago. We've been personal friends and political allies for 3 decades. And we have very similar values, but I'm a different person. I bring my own style to the job, and these are different times. In terms of style, I'm not afraid to litigate. I'm not a litigator of first choice. Dick had a much more of a litigation background. I'm much more of my personal inclination is to view things as problems to be solved, and so I'm a very low key person. I've only had 2 press conferences in almost 5 months in office.
I know. The people in your building don't know when to go to lunch anymore. They used to know it was time to go to lunch when the press showed up for the daily news conference.
and that doesn't make it better or worse. It's just different. So I don't hesitate to bring my own personal style to the job. What a lot of people don't understand is that of the 54,000 cases this office handles a year, 210 superb lawyers. Dick did a great job in attracting and retaining superb talent. 97% of those cases are what we call non-discretionary, which is to say, it's the meat and potatoes of running state government, defending the state when it's sued, reviewing more than 4,000 contracts. I take very seriously governance. I think that the foundation of a civil society is where the public has confidence in its public institutions, and so I take very seriously having my office function in a way that makes government work well and work right for them. And so I've really been focused on that aspect of the job, because in these times of having to do more with less, that's where I really have to be focused. And so as we move along, you'll see more of me in the press, but right now it's really focused heavily on the kind of the guts of making government work right.
I'd like to ask you, since we just reviewed the House debate on the qualifications, how you feel about the qualifications being changed and whether the direction they look like they're going in is appropriate.
I've had taken a pretty low profile on this issue because I'm in a I can't win situation really because I was the beneficiary clearly of last year's Supreme Court decision where my principal opponent for the Democratic nomination, Susan Beiswitz, was declared ineligible for the job. And prior to that decision, I said, I didn't come down either way. I said, look, this is for the courts to decide. It really could go either way, and I believed that at the time. And so if I were to be publicly aggressively out front on this, it would look self-serving in one way or another, and so I've tried to avoid that. I think that the Bar Association, which really took a hard look at this, they came up with and suggested that changes be made that broaden the reach of those who would be eligible to serve, and I think I think they've done a good job. I think the legislature's done a good job, and so I'm supportive of the legislation. It's the appropriate thing to do.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking about some of the things that your office does that are outside of litigation, that there'd be an awful lot of very competent people who've been doing that in corporate work or private practice who'd be disqualified under the old qualifications.
Absolutely. Actually, most lawyers would be disqualified under the way the Supreme Court has set it up. And it doesn't mean the Supreme Court interpreted the statute wrongly. I'm not being critical of them because that statute was written long time ago when what was viewed as the core job of Attorney General was viewed in a different way. In today's world, you need someone that goes way beyond simple courtroom experience, and actually it's unusual, very unusual for the Attorney General himself or herself to appear in court, and there's no need for it because you have superbly qualified assistant attorneys general who know the particular case, know it intimately to be handling that particular role.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that are in front of you right now. Let's start with the foreclosure investigation. It's a multi-state investigation and looking for a multi-state settlement. What was the problem? Can you talk about robo-signing and who really got hurt?
This is a huge issue, and it's squarely on my desk. I'm part of, and one of the good things about the attorneys general across the country is that we, unlike the National Congress, we actually work pretty well together on issues of common interest because there's no Republican or Democratic way to fight Medicaid fraud or to deal with internet privacy issues or in this case the foreclosure crisis. This is incredible, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can, but it's a very complex area. The short version is that the big banks who dominate the mortgage lending and servicing have done an incredibly bad job in dealing with the foreclosure crisis that erupted almost 3 years ago with the collapse of our near collapse of our financial system and the severe downturn in the economy. And they've had plenty of time to ramp up to deal intelligently with this. And it's all of us sharing this. It's not just people whose homes are underwater or face foreclosure, because until the housing market recovers, the economy is not going to get back on its feet. And tens of millions of homeowners who have lost equity in their homes and their 401ks have gone down. So it's all wrapped up together. And so the banks who all of them got bailed out. All of them got bailed out by Connecticut, by American taxpayers. They need to step up to the plate and do what's right. The leverage that we have as state attorneys general lies in the fact that because the banks did a bad job ramping up 2+ years ago, they engaged systematically in illegal behavior, what we call the robo-signings, where they rode roughshod over the legal process for initiating foreclosures. People were falsely swearing that they had witnessed things that they had not
that
witnessed,
they had
never seen before, and it occurred all across the country to varying degrees by all of these mortgage servicers. And what it does is it gives us as attorneys general leverage to go to them, which was initiated last fall, to say, hey, you need to clean up your act. And what we're looking for in Connecticut, I'm proud to say, is one of the lead states. Tom Miller, the attorney general from Iowa, is the lead on it, but Connecticut is about a half dozen on what's called the executive committee negotiating with these big banks. And what we're asking for is two things. I'm not at liberty to discuss in detail, but we're asking for a very large pot of money measured in the billions of dollars. It's billions with a B. That money would be used for two things. One, for where a homeowner is holding on, and with a modest loan modification, they would be able to stay in their home and complete their payments. So mortgage assistance for those loan modifications, and secondly, for those who are just going to be in foreclosure no matter what. They still don't have a job. They're so far behind. They're never going to catch up. But they need transition assistance into rental housing. That would be this would be money for moving costs, money for first month, last month to put down on an apartment. So that's number one. Pot of money to ease people through this, homeowners through this crisis. Second is a protocol, an agreed set of procedures whereby the banks would be putting the staff in place so that those going through foreclosure would have a single point of contact for example. There would not be dual track where you're trying to do a modification and a foreclosure at the same time, which doesn't work. So the banks would be agreeing to a set of protocols and the staff resources behind them to make that very difficult, terrible transition workable.
Let's talk about something that affects everybody, and that is consumer privacy and data release. What privacy? My smartphone can tell anybody where I've been